She fined me $1,200 for unapproved exterior lighting, even though the bulbs were factory standard warm white, stamped UL listed. 3 days later, she marched onto my porch with a clipboard and a phone camera, calling it an inspection. That's when I started recording everything: dates, names, times, wattages. Welcome to HOA Society. I'm Ethan Myers, civil engineer out of Lakewood, Washington, and lately, part-time amateur constitutionalist, whether I like it or not. If you're here, you probably know what it's like when a homeowners association forgets what home means. Subscribe if you believe sunlight and sanity belong in our neighborhoods. And tell me, where are you watching from tonight? I moved to Echo Ridge Estates 8 years ago, right after my wife, Allison, passed. I needed quiet, something I could measure with my hands: wood grain, soil, water line. I built that cabin by the lake myself, every board sanded by moonlight. I paid every assessment, followed every bylaw. But grief leaves a silence people mistake for weakness, and in HOA politics, weakness is blood in the water. The new president, Gloria Linton, smelled it immediately. She had that glossy confidence of someone who printed her name on every welcome packet. She loved compliance drives. I caught her once on the cul-de-sac, telling a new couple that Echo Ridge doesn't do eccentric. When she looked at my solar panels, barely visible from the street, she frowned like I'd parked a rusted truck on the lawn. Her first letter came on January 12, 2023. Subject: violation, unapproved solar array placement. She cited Section 14B(2), a clause so ancient it referenced wattage limits from 1998. Fine, $600 plus $50 per day until rectified. I walked the letter straight to her office, a converted guest room with a fake gavel on her desk, and told her the state's Renewable Energy Act preempted that rule since 2019. She smiled. Then sue us. That night, I sat on the porch and stared at the lake, thinking about Allison's old promise: keep the house standing. The reflection of the moon hit the panel glass like a shield. I decided to make notes. Every date, every rule, every conversation. I didn't know it yet, but I was starting an investigation. Over the next 2 weeks, the letters multiplied. One for my mailbox height, 43 inches instead of 42, another for non-standard tree trimming, and a third because my shed appeared residential in design. I joked to my neighbor, old Frank Reynolds, that my shed had an identity crisis. Frank coughed a laugh and said, "Gloria's running this place like Fort Knox, but she's playing with fire." Frank used to be a county inspector before retirement. He started pulling binders from his garage, dusty and thick with local codes. "There's overlap," he said, flipping through pages. "County zoning trumps HOA on certain utilities. Folks forget that." He pointed at one clause: Parcel-Based Drainage Authority, 1995 revision. That's your back door. Knowledge nugget number 1. In Washington state, HOAs can't regulate systems tied to county stormwater or energy infrastructure. Those fall under public oversight. I didn't act immediately. I wanted to see how far Gloria would push. By March, she convened a special compliance meeting and summoned me. I went, wearing a clean shirt and my engineer's calm. The board sat behind folding tables, a pitcher of water sweating onto cheap paper cups. Gloria leaned in. "Mr. Myers, the board has voted unanimously that your continued non-compliance constitutes willful defiance. We can escalate fines up to $1,000 per day." I said quietly, "You'll bankrupt your own reserve fund in litigation before you see a dime." She tilted her head, voice sugar-sweet. "Then let's test your theory." Outside, the wind bit through my jacket. Frank waited by his truck. "They're bluffing," he said, "but you'll need proof before you swing back." He handed me a manila folder, county energy permits from 2018, including my panel authorization stamped and sealed. "Start there." That night I set up a corkboard in my office. Pins, string, scanned documents. The sound of the printer spooling out paper felt like a heartbeat. I filed everything by date, and I made one rule: no emotion, only evidence. Still, there was a moment around midnight when I found Allison's old handwriting in a margin. "Build something worth keeping." I left that paper on top of the pile. The next morning, I sent Gloria a certified letter acknowledging receipt of all notices, citing the preemption clause, and requesting board meeting minutes per RCW 64.380045. Legally, they had 14 days to respond. On day 15, nothing. On day 16, a new letter appeared. Violation, unkempt lawn edge. Frank just shook his head. They're daring you to break. I didn't. I started filming my lawn edges. I measured them, 2.5 inches, uniform. I even photographed the mower pattern with timestamps. The files stacked up like sandbags. By April, I had enough to see a pattern. Selective enforcement. Gloria's friend, Vice President Todd, had a broken fence for 6 months. No citation. Another board member's son parked his boat trailer on the street every weekend. No notice. Me? Fined for the color of my gutter downspouts, beige instead of community-approved tan. Late that night, I wrote one line in my logbook. Pattern equals discrimination of enforcement equals statutory exposure. And I smiled, just barely. Because the wound was finally finding its purpose. Frank and I spent the next week digging through public databases, cross-referencing parcel IDs with county infrastructure overlays. It turned out that 15 of the HOAs, RT2 homes in Echo Ridge, including mine, sat on parcels partially maintained under a county stormwater easement, meaning the HOA technically had zero jurisdiction over certain property modifications tied to energy or water runoff. Gloria had been fining people for areas she didn't legally control. I wanted to test that quietly before I pulled the pin, so I called an attorney I'd worked with years ago on a structural compliance case, Lisa Chen, municipal law specialist, famous for her ink-stained cuffs and relentless logic. She met me at the diner by Highway 99, ordered black coffee, and didn't smile once. Selective enforcement and false jurisdiction, she said, scanning my folder. It's not enough to win, but it's enough to make them nervous. What do you need from me? I asked. Records, she replied. Emails, meeting minutes, any proof they ignored county limits. Then we'll draft a cease and desist citing ultra-virus acts, actions beyond their authority. But don't send it yet. Let them think they're safe. I nodded, scribbling her phrase in my notebook. Ultra-virus equals beyond authority. The next board meeting came on May 2nd. I sat quietly in the back while Gloria strutted through her agenda. At one point, she leaned into the mic and said, "We will maintain the highest standards, even if that means removing non-conforming members." Her eyes flicked to me, and the room chuckled like a pack following their alpha. Frank muttered under his breath, "She's writing her own indictment." Then came my favorite part, the treasurer's report. I'd requested to view it under the Open Records Clause, and by law they had to present a summary. Todd fumbled through papers and said, Reserve Fund, $74,200. Operating Fund, $19,800. Lisa's words echoed in my head. Not enough to win, but enough to make them nervous. By the end of the night, I knew two things. One, the BOAs RD didn't understand their financial exposure. Two, they were paying a consulting company, Linton Compliance Partners, Gloria's husband's firm, $1,500 a month for community inspections. That's when I realized this wasn't just about pride. It was about money. Early the next morning, I started the real dig. Knowledge nugget number 2. Most states require HOAs to disclose conflicts of interest and avoid self-dealing contracts. Failure can trigger civil penalties and fiduciary breach claims. Using the state's corporate registry, I pulled filings for Linton Compliance Partners, LLC. Registered owner, Michael Linton. Principal office, Gloria's home address. I printed it, stamped it, evidence, and slid it into my growing binder. That afternoon, Frank and I met in my garage, surrounded by blueprints and coffee mugs. "She's invoicing her own HOA," I said. "Classic shell game," Frank replied. "You'll need proof of payment flow." So we watched. For 2 weeks, I logged every visible inspection, every clipboard photo session. I caught a guy, must have been one of their contractors, snapping pictures of my backyard through the fence. I called out, "You're on private property, friend." He bolted. I noted the time, May 14th, 3:47 p.m. The next day, Gloria posted on the community app, "Unauthorized solar glare reflecting into lakefront view corridor. Board will address nuisance. That was the moment I understood. She wanted me gone. Around midnight, I walked down to the dock. The lake was still, reflecting a half moon like a camera lens. I thought of Allison, how she'd wanted to host science nights for local kids. Teach them about light and energy, she said once, brushing sawdust from her jeans. That idea had died with her. But now it stirred again. I didn't just want to beat Gloria. I wanted to make Echo Ridge livable again, for every family she'd bullied quiet. Second engagement moment. If you've ever stood up to an HOA or wish you could, drop one tactic in the comments that worked, or that you wish you'd tried. And if you've never faced one, write something for the HOA lurkers watching. They do read these. Back at the diner, Lisa drew a flowchart on a napkin. Fines, budgets, contract loops. If they're paying her husband's company, we can request discovery of invoices. But I'd like one more layer, something they can't wiggle around. Like what? Land rights, she said. Every HOA has them tangled somewhere. Find a covenant, lease, or easement they depend on. You break that, you control the board's oxygen. Frank grinned. And we just might have that. He pulled an old survey map from 1994. The Lake Access Trail, Parcel 6C, technically belongs to the county. The HOA just maintains it under a renewable lease. Next renewal date? He jabbed his finger at the note. December 31st, 2023. A smile crept up my face. So if I find a way to acquire or influence that lease? Lisa finished my thought. You'd own their common access. Don't tell anyone. Not yet. That night, I drew a timeline on my wall. May 15th, begin paper trail. July 1st, file quiet inquiries. October, lock leverage. December 31st, public reveal. I pinned a yellow sticky under it. Reversal number 1 target, 6C access lease. Then I closed the blinds and powered down the light. The lake reflected faint through the glass, calm and waiting. But Gloria wasn't done. The next morning, a city vehicle idled in front of my cabin. Code enforcement, anonymous complaint, unauthorized structure expansion. I watched as the officer measured my deck, shook his head, and left without citation. Still, someone had called them. That evening, I found a new letter taped to my door. Notice of board review, potential suspension of voting rights. Frank exhaled slow. They're escalating. Good, I said. That means they're scared. But inside, I felt something colder, fear for what they'd try next. The next 2 weeks were a blur of intimidation, anonymous calls at night, hang-ups, a truck idling near my drive at 2 a.m., the soft click of a phone camera behind the hedge. I installed a motion light and filed a police report. Nothing dramatic, just a factual log. Washington's harassment statute requires repeated unwanted contact to meet the threshold. I wanted that paper trail. One morning, I found my trash can tagged with a neon orange sticker. Improper container placement. $75 fine. It was exactly 6 inches past the curb. I measured, wrote it down. Photograph, timestamp, 6:42 a.m., June 3rd. The harassment wasn't random. It was psychological attrition. They wanted fatigue to replace precision. But engineering trains you for tolerance limits. Every beam, every load. You just calculate and hold. Frank started dropping by daily. He'd sit on the porch, sipping from his dented thermos, telling stories from his county days. Power makes people stupid, he said. Give them a title and a clipboard, and they forget gravity still works. Lisa called one evening. You're sure you want to keep the decked cards close? Yes, I said. Let them write the record for me. She paused. Just remember, retaliation claims strengthen with documentation. Keep everything first person and date stamped. Knowledge nugget number 3. Retaliation under HOA law often mirrors employment statutes. If adverse actions follow a protected request, like open records or complaints, liability doubles. By late June, Gloria scheduled an emergency compliance vote. The agenda posted online at 11 p.m. the night before, violating their own 48-hour notice rule. I printed it anyway. Item 3. Authority to seek injunctive relief against non-compliant member, Lot 17, my parcel. Frank muttered, "They're about to light themselves on fire." At the meeting, Gloria's voice filled the hall. "We cannot allow fuels to undermine community integrity. If necessary, we'll petition the county for injunctive relief. I raised my hand. Madam President, before you proceed, could you confirm the board's financial relationship with Linton Compliance Partners? Her smile tightened. Irrelevant to this motion. Then I move to table until conflict disclosures are provided. The room buzzed. Todd whispered to her. She banged the gavel. Plastic. Loud. Motion denied. I recorded every word. Washington's a one-party consent state, and I was that party. That night I emailed Lisa the audio and attached the agenda timestamp. She wrote back one line. Perfect chain of bad faith. July 2nd, I filed my first formal grievance with the state HOA ombudsman. That bought me a clock. 90 days for mediation before they could escalate to court. 90 days was exactly what I needed for the 6C lease maneuver. Meanwhile, Frank and I traced the lease to a small county office downtown. Clerk name, Marcia Phelps, veteran of 30 years. When I asked for the renewal terms, she said, that lease auto-renews unless a qualified party files a maintenance claim. What's a qualified party? I asked. Anyone listed as adjacent property with utility contribution, she said, flipping the folder. Looks like you. My heartbeat ticked like a metronome. If I filed the claim, you'd inherit first option maintenance rights. Basically, you'd become the HOA's landlord for the trail. Frank grinned. Merry Christmas early. We left with a stamped copy, official seal dated July 7th, 2023. I stored it in a fireproof box. That night, under the soft hum of my desk lamp, I opened a new document, Echo Ridge Trail Maintenance Agreement, Assignment Intent. The clause language was boilerplate, but the implication wasn't. By Q4, I could legally control their lake access. Before closing my laptop, I scrolled through a community forum. Someone had posted, "Why's the board spending so much on inspection fees this year?" The post vanished within an hour. I screenshotted it, evidence number 47. As the July heat rolled in, I started hearing more murmurs at the mail kiosk. Neighbors whispering about dues increases, $200 jumps, no explanation. That's when I realized the real battle wasn't just legal, it was narrative. So I printed flyers, neutral in tone. Understand your HOA rights. Public information session, August 5th, Community Center. No accusations, just statutes and resources. When Gloria saw the notice on the bulletin board, her smile looked carved from ice. Unauthorized assembly under HOA premises, she said. I replied, then I'll host it on the county trail. Her jaw clenched. Late that night, a thump hit my porch. Another envelope, hand-delivered. Notice of intent to suspend amenities. I laughed under my breath. Amenities I'm about to own, I muttered. Comment challenge for you. Where should the line fall between community standards and private property rights? Should an HOA be able to control your porch light, your solar panels, your lawn color? Tell me what freedom means on your street, or at least like the video if you've had to learn it the hard way. The morning of August 5th arrived heavy with mist. I set up folding chairs along the trail, coffee and thermoses, a small speaker for my laptop. 21 neighbors came, more than I expected. I explained how preemption worked, how selective enforcement could void fines. Frank talked about county jurisdiction. We stayed factual, calm, lawful. Halfway through, Gloria appeared with 2 board members and her husband. She started shouting about trespass. Then a county park officer pulled up, clipboard in hand. Actually, ma'am, he said, this land is under active maintenance review. Mr. Myers is within his rights. The silence that followed could have frozen the lake. I caught Frank's small nod, quiet confirmation that the leverage was now live. The next morning, the tone of the neighborhood had shifted. People who once avoided eye contact at the mailbox now stopped to ask questions. Ethan, is it true they can't fine us for garden lights? One woman asked. Only if they follow their own rules first, I told her, handing her a copy of the HOA's governing statutes with my annotations in the margins. The word selective had started echoing through conversations like an alarm clock no one could unhear. Gloria, though, doubled down. She sent out a community preservation update claiming misinformation was spreading. The letter looked official, bold seal, her signature in blue ink, but the phrasing was desperate. Unapproved meetings have caused confusion, it read. Trust your elected board. I printed that one too. Evidence number 63. Lisa called that night. They're unraveling, she said. When control systems rely on fear, information is acid. Keep dripping it. So I did. I started a small newsletter, Echo Writes, sent weekly with factual summaries, public record links, and one polite reminder. Transparency is not rebellion. By week 3, over 30 residents were subscribed. On August 20th, I got an email from Gloria marked Urgent Violation Enforcement. The fine total now sat at $7,650. She'd compounded them with late fees. The tone was smug. Continued resistance will compel legal escalation. I replied in one sentence. Any attempt to enforce fines without lawful jurisdiction will be met with a counterclaim for damages under RCW 64.38.050. I copied Lisa and the county ombudsman. That's when the real retaliation began. First, an inspector appeared again. Different badge this time. Animal welfare. Complaint. Unregistered pet activity. I don't own a pet. The officer sighed when I showed him the empty yard. You must have ticked someone off, he said, and left. Then my mailbox lock jammed, looked drilled. The HOA's private security camera, conveniently, was offline. And finally, someone dumped a pile of trash bags at the edge of my driveway, tagged HOA property cleanup overflow. Frank came over the next morning, stepping around the mess. This is harassment, plain and simple, he said. We need to formalize the evidence package. We spent 6 hours compiling everything. Letters, recordings, timestamps. Lisa joined via Zoom, her sleeves rolled up. We're moving from defense to offense, she said. Once you file for declaratory relief, they can't hide behind procedure. Knowledge nugget number 4. A declaratory judgment lets a court clarify legal rights before damage accrues. Powerful against false fines or voided covenants. By September 12th, we filed the petition. It wasn't glamorous, just 40 pages of cold, deliberate text. Lisa attached appendices, property maps, the conflict of interest contracts, the trail maintenance stamp. Gloria must have gotten served around noon because by 4 p.m., my phone buzzed with a community alert. Special board meeting. Emergency council consultation. Frank chuckled. She'll spend the night Googling ultravirus. Still, I kept my cool. The plan wasn't to humiliate them yet. The plan was patience. But patience has a breaking point, and mine came 2 nights later. I returned home from the grocery store to find my side gate wide open. Footprints in the damp soil. Someone had gone into my backyard. My shed door hung slightly ajar, the padlock cut. Inside, my files were untouched, but Allison's old toolbox lay spilled across the floor. For the first time, I felt the tremor of real anger, cold, precise, not reckless. I called the sheriff's office. Officer Raymond Holt arrived 20 minutes later, boots crunching gravel. Tall, quiet, mustache silvered at the edges. He examined the latch and said, "Clean cut, bolt cutters." He took a statement, promised to log it as suspected trespass, possible retaliation under HOA authority. That last phrase stuck with me, under HOA authority. It wasn't just vandalism, it was misuse of power. 2 days later, the sheriff returned for follow-up. Gloria happened to drive by, window down. "Everything all right here?" she called, voice bright but thin. Raymond tipped his hat. "Just ensuring property security, ma'am." She drove off without another word. That moment, the sight of her realizing law enforcement was now in the loop, became the hinge. Because once the sheriff's office documented their behavior, any false step turned criminal, not civil. I didn't tell her that, of course. I wanted her to keep talking. Late September, the board announced an autumn dues audit. They claimed a shortfall, blaming legal costs. Residents started murmuring, "Where's our money going?" And for the first time, I wasn't the one fanning the fire. Frank leaned back one evening, watching the lake sunset paint the water bronze. "You ever think about what happens after this?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "We rebuild it right." He smiled. "Then you'd better start drafting bylaws that make sense." Debate for you. Should HOA boards face term limits like public offices, or is volunteer turnover enough? I'd like to hear what you'd change where you live. By October, everything was set. The county office confirmed my maintenance claim on parcel 6C. The document arrived in the mail, official seal, my name listed as primary caretaker with renewal rights. I stared at it for a long time, feeling the weight of leverage. Visual beat number 1. I placed the stamped lease in my fire pit, held it over the flame just long enough to curl the edges, then pressed it flat under glass, a reminder that power burns both ways. Frank watched, arms crossed. When do we use it? When they make their next move, I said. They'll come hard, and then they'll meet the sheriff again, but this time in public. October slid into a raw, rainy November, and with every cold front, the HOA's tone turned sharper. Gloria called for a mandatory community assembly on the 12th, ostensibly about budget stability, but everyone knew it was a counterattack. I'd been served a notice of potential lien for unpaid fines totaling $9,950. Lisa was ready. They can't lien property without valid authority, she said over the phone. It's bluff, but keep the paper trail clean. If they record it, we counterfile under wrongful encumbrance. Let them hang by procedure. I walked into that meeting with my binder tucked under one arm and Frank behind me like an old battle standard. Rain drummed against the community hall's tin roof. Folding chairs squeaked. The smell of burnt coffee filled the air. Gloria stood at the podium, hair immaculate, voice crisp. Certain residents believe they're above our standards. This defiance has cost our association $4,200 in legal consultation. We will not tolerate anarchy. I waited for her to finish her speech about community integrity. Then I raised my hand. Point of order, Madam President. Did the board vote to authorize those legal expenses? She blinked. That's administrative business. Not under RCW 64.38.35. All expenditures above 5% of the operating budget require a recorded vote. You didn't hold one. Murmurs rippled through the room. Todd shuffled papers. A neighbor whispered, "Is that true?" Lisa's training paid off. I didn't shout. I let the silence do the talking. Then Gloria snapped. "You think you're some kind of lawyer?" "No," I said, "just a homeowner who reads." The moment she tried to gavel me down, Frank cleared his throat. "And I'm a retired county inspector who helped draft the original maintenance permit you've been ignoring since 2001. He pulled out the certified copy. "Funny thing, this one shows the Lake Trail leases. Under county control, not HOA. The current caretaker's name?" He looked at me. "Ethan Myers." The room froze. For a full 5 seconds, the only sound was the rain. Gloria forced a laugh. "You think owning a trail gives you power?" "Not power," I said. "Jurisdiction." That's when Todd blurted, "You can't, he can't," but his voice cracked mid-sentence. Frank leaned toward me. "That's your cue. They're off balance." I didn't need more encouragement. I walked to the podium and laid the stamped lease copy flat for everyone to see. This document was recorded July 7th with the county. It establishes maintenance and access rights for Parcel 6C, the same path listed in your CCRs as the community's sole lake access. Meaning, as of now, I control the easement you've been citing in every nuisance notice. A neighbor gasped. Another whispered, "Oh my God." Gloria's face drained of color. "This is absurd." "Maybe," I said, "but it's legal." That was reversal number 1. The secret leverage was now active. The next week turned chaotic. Anonymous posts on the forum accused me of stealing community property. Someone slipped flyers under doors calling me a saboteur. My mailbox overflowed with complaints printed from the HOA's newsletter. I didn't reply. Instead, I printed them all, added them to the binder, labeled the section Retaliation Phase. Then came the inspection marathon. Over 3 days, I logged 6 separate drive-bys by supposed contractors, 2 code complaints, and 1 unannounced visit from a private security guard claiming to check perimeter compliance. I filmed every one. The night after the last visit, I sat on the porch with Frank, the lake mist rolling in like smoke. "You scared yet?" he asked. "Honestly," I said. "A little. Not of them. Of how close this got to breaking something in me." He nodded slowly. "Keep your mind steady, son. Revenge is a short fuse. Justice takes wiring." We fell quiet. The only sound was the plunk of water against the dock. Inside, I opened my logbook and found Allison's note again. "Build something worth keeping." I underlined it twice. The next day, I got an email from the HOA's attorney. "Cease and desist. defamation and trespass. They accused me of misleading residents, unauthorized occupation of common areas, and defamatory insinuations. Lisa read it and laughed. They're bluffing into a storm. Can we turn it back on them? I asked. Oh, we can do better. We'll stage the reveal where they can't twist it. An open forum with oversight. I'll make sure the sheriff's office sends someone for security. Once the law stands in the room, they can't pretend you're the villain. Debate time for everyone watching. When a board crosses into harassment, what's the best defense? Court filings, public exposure, or buying leverage like I did? Which path would you take in your own neighborhood? November 29th, a formal meeting notice went out. Special hearing, December 5th, Community Center. Purpose: clarify ownership and enforcement rights regarding lake access parcel. Gloria tried to frame it as a chance to resolve confusion, but I saw through it. It was her last play to regain control. Lisa flew up from Seattle that morning. She wore a gray suit and carried a hard-shell case that clicked like a metronome when she walked. No emotion, she said quietly. Just facts. Let them self-destruct on record. Frank brought the projector. I brought the binder. Visual beat number 2 was forming in my mind even before the gavel fell. The image of a sheriff's badge glinting under fluorescent light as I laid my papers on the table. And when the crowd filled that hall, damp coats steaming, eyes sharp with months of frustration, I knew this wasn't just my fight anymore. The December 5th meeting started like every other, except this time the air felt charged, static crawling across every breath, rows of folding chalshits, airs packed tighter than I'd ever seen, neighbors shoulder to shoulder, eyes flicking between Gloria and me like spectators before a verdict. Sheriff Raymond stood by the rear wall, arms crossed, his badge catching light from the ceiling fan. Lisa sat at my side, flipping through her binder, calm as stone. Frank manned the small projector with the document queue ready. Gloria opened strong, her tone all honey and order. We're gathered to clarify ownership of the community lake access, as misinformation has caused unnecessary division. Let's be civil, neighbors. I waited until she finished her preamble before I stood. Thank you, Madam President. I believe we can resolve this tonight, with facts. Lisa nodded slightly. Showtime. I projected the first image, the parcel 6C lease, county seal bright under the lens. The date and my signature clear as sunrise. This, I said, is the recorded maintenance agreement signed July 7, 2023. By county code, it grants caretaker jurisdiction over the access trail and all structures within its boundary. Gloria interrupted. That's an interpretation. Lisa stood, voice crisp. Madam President, the statute is explicit. County Code 9.32.1110. The designated maintenance holder retains authority over access and use until superseded by county resolution. Would you like me to read it aloud? A few chuckles rippled through the crowd. Gloria flushed. You're twisting this. Raymond stepped forward, slow and deliberate. Ma'am, the county's office verified that document this afternoon. It's legitimate. Silence. Pure, electric silence. Lisa clicked to the next slide. The conflict of interest filing. Linton Compliance Partners, LLC, registered at Gloria's address. And here, she said, is your self-dealing contract. Your husband's company billed the HOA for inspections you authorized. That's a violation of RCW 64.38.045, subsectio, Eon 3. The whisper spread through the room like wind through dry leaves. Gloria slammed her palm on the table. This is defamation. No, I said quietly. This is accounting. Todd tried to step in, waving a sheet. The board's attorney has advised. Lisa cut him off. That's enough. You've all been operating under false authority. The fines, the threats, the surveillance, it ends tonight. Raymond's voice landed like a gavel. As of now, the sheriff's office is opening a review for criminal mischief, harassment, and misuse of position. You'll each be contacted for statements. That was the sound of dominoes beginning to fall. Neighbors started clapping, not loud at first, but steady. A slow, rhythmic release of months of fear. Frank whispered, "That's the sound of oxygen coming back." Gloria tried to leave, but the crowd wasn't done. One man stood up. A quiet electrician named Javier. "You fined me $300 for a faded mailbox," he said. "You called me non-conforming in the minutes. I kept my mouth shut, not anymore. Another neighbor rose. You charged us for legal counsel we never voted on. And another. You made my daughter cry over Christmas lights. The hall erupted, not in chaos, but in collective clarity. Lisa leaned close and said, "We hold while it burns down. No gloating." I nodded, but inside I could feel something heavy lifting off my chest. Months of tight-breathed mornings uncoiling all at once. When the noise died down, Gloria muttered something about reserving rights, gathered her papers, and left. Todd stayed seated, staring at the table. That night, back home, I opened the window over my desk. Cold air smelled of pine and thawed mud. The reflection of the lake shimmered against the glass. I thought of Allison again, how she used to say, "You don't fix a broken frame by breaking the glass. You replace the corners." It wasn't over. I knew that. They'd resign, or deny, or drag it out. But the power had already shifted. Still, I needed to make sure the shift didn't stop with me. Frank suggested forming a transition committee. "Once the old board folds, you'll need new elections fast," he said. "Otherwise the vultures circle again." Lisa agreed. "Use your leverage to force reforms, not revenge. That's what lasts." Comment for the record, folks. Should residents have open access to all HOA financials online, full transparency? Or do you think privacy for board discussions is justified? I'd love to see where people draw the line. 3 days later, an emergency email went out. Board resignations effective immediately. Interim elections scheduled. Domino 1. The county's ethics office opened an inquiry. The HOA's insurer froze their policy pending review. Local news sniffed around. By December 10th, the story hit a regional feed. Lakewood HOA faces conflict of interest probe. Sheriff confirms review. I didn't speak publicly. I didn't need to. Visual beat number 2 became reality that week. A rain-beaded microphone standing on a folding table as neighbors lined up to nominate new candidates. The sheriff stood near the exit, a quiet guardian of order. And for the first time in months, the meeting ended with laughter. The night after the resignations, I drove around the neighborhood just to feel the quiet. The Christmas lights people had once hidden now flickered freely again, blue, red, and white reflections dancing across wet asphalt. The air carried the smell of cedar smoke, not fear. For the first time, I realized how much sound absence makes when it's relief. But the victory wasn't complete. Gloria hadn't disappeared. She still held certain digital accounts, email lists, bank access, and word came down she was threatening to restore order with a petition. Lisa called early the next morning. "Don't underestimate her. People like that try one last counterstrike before surrender." I asked, "What's our next step?" "Leverage. Becomes reform," she said. "We trade the lease back, but only for permanent changes." Frank raised an eyebrow. "You're going to negotiate with her." "Not with her," Lisa said, "with the community that'll replace her." We drafted a plan over diner coffee and stale pie. Term limits, open financial portals, independent ethics review, annual audit publication. We wrote it as a memorandum of reform, something any future board would have to adopt to regain the lake access rights I now controlled. December 15th, an interim committee met in the same hall where the showdown happened. The tone was cautious but hopeful. Javier, the electrician, took the mic. "We can't just swap names and repeat history. We need sunlight in the bylaws." I stood and said, "Then let's start by defining it." We outlined each clause. Public budget posting within 10 days of every month's close, recorded meetings archived online, conflict of interest disclosures required quarterly. Lisa explained each statute, citing state precedent. Frank added notes on maintenance accountability. Halfway through, someone asked, "Will Gloria fight it?" I smiled. "Only if she wants to keep paying taxes on property she doesn't own." The laughter broke the tension like a window opening in spring. 2 days later, Gloria emailed a single line. "If you restore our access, I'll sign whatever reforms you want." Lisa verified her signature at the county clerk's office that afternoon. I handed over the trail maintenance rights, officially transferring them back to the HOA, under the new charter. That was reversal number 2, visual beat number 3. The ink stamp hit the deed with a dull final thud. Transfer recorded, 12/17/23, 3:46 p.m. A single clean mark that turned battle into structure. For the audience following, here's the debate question. When a system like this collapses, should the people responsible face criminal sentencing, or is public removal and restitution enough? I know what I think, but I want to hear yours. By Christmas, the dominoes finished falling. The county ease. Thick's office confirmed that Gloria and Todd had violated multiple fiduciary duties. They reached a consent decree, barred from serving on any HOA board for 5 years, fined $8,000, ordered to repay community funds. No jail, just exposure. The insurer reinstated the HOA policy under the new leadership. The headline in the Lakewood Chronicle read, "Echo Ridge elects reform board after governance scandal." Frank and I walked the lake trail that evening. He paused to kick a stray pine cone into the water. "You ever think Allison would have liked this ending?" he asked. "She'd have laughed at how long it took," I said. "Then she'd probably repaint the whole meeting hall." He chuckled, the sound rough and kind. "You did good, kid." Later that week, neighbors hosted a Light the Lake night. Free cider, kids running with glow sticks, old folks in blankets near fire pits. No one mentioned bylaws or fines. Someone hung a banner on the gazebo. "Community belongs to everyone." Lisa stopped by with a cup of cocoa, sleeves ink-stained as ever. "I've got another case in Tacoma," she said. "Different HOA, same disease. You in?" I looked out over the water, the reflections of the lanterns pulsing against the waves. "Maybe after New Year's," I said. "Let's make sure this one stays healed first." The next morning, the HOA website launched its new transparency portal. Meeting minutes, ledgers, contracts, all public. The front page quote read, "Transparency is not rebellion." And underneath it, small text, "Credit, E. Myers, Lot 17. Frank called it poetic justice. I called it closure. But deep down, I knew there was always another neighborhood somewhere, another Gloria rehearsing her speech about community standards. Winter settled in quietly after the lights faded. The lake froze around the edges, a thin silver film that cracked softly when the morning sun hit it. For the first time, in nearly a year, I could wake up, make coffee, and not check my porch for an envelope. That kind of silence, the lawful kind, has its own weight. In January, the new board met for the first time under the reform charter. Javier was elected president by unanimous vote. He still wore the same flannel from the showdown, but now it looked like a uniform of integrity. Frank chaired the maintenance subcommittee, grumbling about drainage patterns and soil compaction. Lisa served as outside counsel for policy compliance. And me? I took a back seat. I just sat in the audience, listening. Javier began the meeting with a single sentence that felt like a benediction. "No one here is above the sunlight." The crowd applauded, softly, sincerely. Afterward, I walked to the edge of the lake. The air smelled like thawing earth and pine sap. My reflection looked older, steadier. I thought about the months of fear, the cameras, the fines, the phone calls at 2 a.m., and how each one had forced me toward a kind of clarity I didn't know I still had. Lisa joined me, hands in pockets. "You ever gonna tell people what it really cost you?" I shrugged. "They don't need my scars, just the blueprint." She smiled faintly. "Well, you've built something worth keeping." I nodded toward the hall where the meeting lights still glowed. Allison's words finally made sense. As news spread, other communities started calling. A reporter from the Seattle Tribune interviewed me about citizen-led governance reform. They framed it like a feel-good story, but I made sure to remind them of the facts. 37 citations voided, 2 resignations, 1 consent decree, 1 sheriff's review, and $8,000 returned to residents. Numbers tell the truth even after emotion fades. The county later issued a short bulletin. Echo Ridge HOA successfully restructured under the state's community integrity framework, first in its district. It wasn't flashy, but it mattered. One Saturday in February, the kids in the neighborhood held a cleanup drive along the trail. I watched them carry trash bags and laugh, the same path that once symbolized control now belonging to them again. A girl, maybe 8, asked, "Mr. Myers, did you really own the lake for a while?" I smiled. "Just long enough to remind the grown-ups who it belongs to." She grinned. "Can I paint the gazebo blue now?" "Ask your board," I said. "They'll probably say yes." The community newsletter ran a small corner column that month. HOA Society Spotlight, Lessons from Echo Ridge. It quoted me, though I hadn't realized they'd recorded the interview. Justice isn't about making them pay. It's about making sure no one has to fight the same battle twice. That line got shared more than I expected. If you believe I fought the right way, and this is how it should end, say a few words in the comments for your friend who's still in their own HOA fight. Subscribe so you'll see what comes next. And as citizens, share this so others learn the lawful path, because accountability only works if it's contagious. A month later, the county clerk mailed me a copy of the finalized charter with a handwritten note. Echo Ridge is now a model file. Thank you for setting the precedent. I framed it above my desk next to Allison's old note. Build something worth keeping. Now, when I drive home and see the lake glint through the trees, I think about how quiet victory actually is. Not the noise of winning, but the absence of fear afterward. What changed after? Gloria and Todd moved to another town where, rumor says, they joined the gardening club instead of a board. The sheriff's file closed clean. The insurer reinstated full coverage, and every spring, Echo Ridge holds an open picnic. No fines, no citations, just food and stories under the same gazebo that started it all. I still keep my binder on the shelf, labeled evidence in faded marker. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. Some fights don't end in courtrooms. They end when a community learns how to govern itself again. And as for me, well, there's talk of another case down in Tacoma. Another HOA that forgot who it serves. Maybe I'll take a drive next week, just to see how their sunlight feels.